kind of running our farmer operation. So I'll let him introduce himself real quick. Go ahead, Steve.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for your time today. And thank you also, Erica and the National Hemp Association for providing this opportunity. So I'm a third generation farmer from southeastern Pennsylvania. I've been interested in hemp for decades and started growing it as soon as it became legal. I grew CBD hemp and kind of went through that challenge, I'll say. But I've always been interested in industrial hemp, and I've grown some for the last 4 years. This year I had 50 acres on my own farm here, doing a lot of research in the context of how to grow it, using regenerative agricultural principles, how to handle it, and then working with Duane a lot here on the backside of processing and marketing and all that. So again, thanks for having me on today.
Awesome. All right, well, we're going to get started. We're going to have just 2 quick slides, and then we're going to get straight into the demonstration of the marketplace so everyone can see what it's about. Of course, it's free, so you could have logged in long before now for free, but we'll get to that in a minute. Let's get to the next slide. Just a little bit about us, because you'll wonder sort of, what are we and why are we doing what we're doing? When I entered this space only a year ago, I sort of exercised the entire supply chain as quickly as I could just to get a sense of for how real it was before we started a business, and realized very quickly that this is a huge opportunity if we can all get together as a community. Again, thank you, Erica, for your work, and that we can move this industry forward. But we saw some significant gaps along the way, and we'll talk a little bit about those. But we're based out of Hazleton, PA. Our farming operations out of Steve's farm in Lancaster. And then we run all of our operations, all our logistics and everything out of Maryland. And we have 3 basic initiatives under Hemp Catalyst, I-HEMP KATALYST, which is the farming, the outreach for farming, because we believe that obviously that is one of the most, if not the most critical parts of making this whole supply chain work. Hence, we picked the leader in regenerative agriculture to be part of our team. We also know that in order to actually take those stalks and make them into anything useful, like fiber, things like this, and all the stuff behind me, you need to decorticate it. And we've decided that decortication has to be probably more geared towards what the manufacturing specs are. And so maybe smaller decortication closer to the manufacturer as well as close to farmer clusters. And then third, we saw some fragmentation in the industry in the U.S., and we thought we'd bring some of our technology, some of the past in the world that we lived in the past, to bear. And so we built out this METAIHEMP platform to donate, basically, to push out there to the industry to see if it's something that we can all use to help accelerate this industry. All right, so these are the sort of as we started walking in. For those of you that have been in the industrial hemp space, first of all, I will tell you that we're only talking about industrial hemp today. We're not talking about any CBD, any of the THC stuff. This is all industrial hemp. But one of the things we've seen across the board, at least talking to many, many manufacturers that we've talked to, is that there's just no consistency in quality in the materials we're producing. Yes, we're producing awesome herd and awesome fiber, but it's not necessarily at the standards and levels of a lot of the manufacturers in the U.S. that are buying it now from overseas. So the question for us is, how do we fill that gap? And part of that is understanding those specs, those specifications, and getting those specifications out to the supply chain so that farmers know, as well as the processors know. Steve taught us very quickly, and I guess we may have known this, but we didn't embrace it maybe as much as I do now. But the whole genetics, farming, harvesting, that whole science of things, and science is probably overstating it because Mother Nature is never scientific. But the notion of how to grow this, where to grow it, how to harvest it, how to collect it, all those things are very critical and very unique to industrial hemp. And so we really didn't have any visibility, at least we didn't, of exactly what farmers were growing what and why. Not that necessarily we had to care, because obviously that's the processors that have contracted with them. But if you look at the supply chain, the manufacturers, when they want to get confidence in our supply chain, they many times say, we need Yuma, or we need this genetic, or we need this genetic, or this is the best genetic for us. If we don't know that up front, then how are we growing to those specs, and to those manufacturer needs? And as I mentioned, the fracturing of the supply chain, we're all doing a lot of great things. And I've been educated by a lot of great people, but it seems like we're sort of not going in any one direction. We're just going in a lot of different directions. And so being able to like connect those dots, if you will, I think was one of those things that we saw an opportunity to do. We also noted that there's a lot of processing that's going towards a certain manufacturer, which is awesome because that's how you have to, do business. But that leaves a lot of inventory, a lot of stuff on the shelf that no one really knows about, and no one has any clear picture of what that is and what the specifications of those in a way that we can map those to manufacturing requests. And so again, having that inventory exposed into a marketplace where manufacturers could see it as well as other folks would be useful. And then manufacturing specs. This is the biggest thing that we saw once we actually started talking to a host of manufacturers in the plastic side, in the textile side, construction, all those kinds of places. They all come with very different specifications. Not one of them is the same. And so the question is, how are we growing and how are we processing to those specs if we're not really aware of those? We may be aware if we have a contract with somebody, that's obvious, but if you want to expand your business, we need to make sure we can get those other manufacturing specs out to the supply chain so that they have visibility into them. And then everything that I did when I first got into this, to buy samples, to get to samples, to find what the quality of the samples, to exercise the shipping of those samples, just took way too long. I'm talking weeks, many emails, many searches. It was never easy. And I think that was another gap that we saw. And so those are sort of like why we built it and now why we've contributed. And so now we'll get into exactly what it is. Steve, did I miss anything on representing any aspect of the farming side of things?
No, I think it's very well stated, Duane. You're a quick study, and I appreciate that. I'll just add that you hear these different things, and it keeps coming up. There are so many variables in growing hemp, in the context of growing it, in the context of harvesting it, in the context of processing it, and then I can add the end users. So this crop is going to take a while, years, this industry, years to develop. And I think I'm not trying to be a pessimist. I'm just trying to be a realist, that we have a lot to learn. And coming from, I know Duane and I and several of the others of you I see here, attendees, you agree with that, but it's a reality that I think we have to take a hold of and own. It's going to take a while before we have this in place, but I'm going to commend Duane for seeing some of these weak spots that we can now connect. I think connecting the dots has been used a lot here, and with this METAIHEMP that we're going to go through right now, I think is going to be helpful in taking this complexity and bringing it more to fruition quicker than if we wouldn't have it. So there you go, Duane. I teed you up for that.
Nice. I appreciate it, sir. All right. So, folks, if you go to METAIHEMP, and we emphasize that AI in the middle, and we'll talk about that, even though artificial intelligence has got a bad name. We'll talk about the models we're building and how that might ultimately help. But metaihemp.com, you'll get you to here, and the first thing you're going to see is a bunch of disclaimers, which I bypass, but if you want to see them, that's basically what you're going to see. And that's basically saying we're not responsible for the quality, the shipping, because I can tell you now, as many times as I ship stuff and it hasn't arrived anywhere near the time it was supposed to, I don't want to be responsible for that. I can't be responsible. We can't be responsible for the quality of the fiber that, or the herd or the grain that people are putting in here. So those are all disclaimers. And then, of course, don't trust what AI tells you, because it's not always right. It's a tool. And we are building that model every day with the latest and greatest of industrial hemp information and research. And so it will be useful, but don't say METAIHEMP told me to grow 6,000 acres of Yuma in Canada or something like that, and then try to charge us for it. Anyway, So when you get here, there's some stuff down at the bottom, but we're going to focus on basically try to make this as simple as possible to register. We didn't want to have to take on a bunch of your information. This is all secure. We come out of a cybersecurity background, so everything we do here is very specific and in tune to being secure. But if you enter your name here, you can basically, we've imported virtually, you know, well, not every, I won't say every, but a lot of farms, a lot of, you know, processors, well, not in that case. So basically, if you come in here, you register, see if you can find your company. And if you do, that's awesome. If not, just type your company name in there. No big deal. When you fill all this out, if you're just coming in as a user, you want to go out, right, search things, find things, buy things. You're not adding products, meaning you're not adding your herd or seed or your grains or your fiber, or you're not adding your yield if you're a farmer, or you're not adding specific specifications as a manufacturer. You don't have to check that box here. But if you're going to actually be engaged into this by adding stuff to it, then you're going to need to do that. And then we have a checks and balances to make sure people aren't adding things like CBD and THC products in here, because that's definitely not what we're about today, not this discussion at least. So once you do that, you're just going to log in. You're going to go through that two-factor authentication, which means you're going to have to get a code and all that other stuff. So I apologize for that. But once you get in, the goal is to make it simple, right? What we said is, in order for me to have bought different fiber and herd from different processors along the way, searching, finding, buying, executing the purchase, executing the shipping was not ideal. We got it, but it wasn't ideal. And so what we've tried to do is produce something that's very easy to use. If you're interested in searching for things, it's either a basic search or a very specific advanced search. And we'll go through some of this in a second. But inside this marketplace, you have a whole host of farmers, you have processors, and you have manufacturers. You're seeing names up here. When you log in, probably you won't see these names. And we de-identify the manufacturers at all times, because we don't want people reaching out to manufacturers. Basically, what will happen in here is we'll match you with a manufacturer when your specifications match the specifications within some level of percentage for the manufacturer. So farmers, processors, manufacturers, all industrial hemp. There's some things you can do, which there are paid for fees. None of these are going to be active anytime soon, because we just are starting. But eventually, getting access to all that supply chain information and our artificial intelligence model will cost a little something. But again, don't worry about that today. You'll see a little bit about our supply chain. This is obviously in its very early phases and stages, but we'll go through this as well as what does that mean? Why did we do this? And how does it get used? And then, of course, our little chatbot that we've created that is very specific to industrial hemp and trained with our own models. So we're not using ChatGPT's models. We're using our own models. All right. So what are we looking at here? If I was, say, a processor and I was looking at a farmer that might be growing, say, Future, whoops, if I could spell. Future 75, what I'm basically going to get is a farmer, basically descriptions of exactly what that yield looked like as far as diameter and herd. And you'll also see along the way we add things in there like the 2-month mark. For this, you'll actually see the fiber strands at that 2-month mark, as well as at the harvest mark, you'll see those. But the important thing here is all this information, which Steve does for our farmer network. And so they basically put in very specific information on how it was, you know, how many seeds per acre, row spacing, all these things. When you're taught about it and you finally understand it, you realize that all these things for a processor and even for a manufacturer to have visibility in is critical. If I know a farmer is growing it and harvesting it to the specs of a quality standard, and that they're willing to share that information to the supply chain, it's going to go a long way for building that confidence in the quality aspect to the supply chain. So all this data is basically there for the processor and manufacturer to look at. And of course, if you wanted to start buying things, it's simple as basically just saying how many pounds of this that you might want to buy, you add it to the cart. And now you've got it up there in the cart for you to purchase. We'll get into that a little bit later as far as exactly how that gets executed. But what you're seeing also in this is that there's manufacturers in here that basically have put in there the fact that they recommended or they are looking for Futura 75. And then when you look in some of those specs, you'll actually see all the specifications for this manufacturer, all the moisture content, the powder, all the things that we would love to know, how much quantity they have, how much is under contract. So all these things are important, right? Because ultimately, if I'm going to grow something and process something, it'd be really nice to know that there's a market for it, but then also what is the specifications of that end product, so that as I'm growing it and processing it, I'm processing to those specifications. As I said, the manufacturers, when they enter all these specifications, and whether you're these or something a little bit more sophisticated, higher quality, and a lot more like tonnage, you can see it's a pretty significant amount. Again, this is basically all the parameters that manufacturer saying is important to their product, for their product. And what we will do, as I said, if you're a processor and you're actually putting these specs in, we know that you could make up these specs and be matched instantly, like a dating app. It's going to match you with that manufacturer, but it won't take long before you start getting rated inside the marketplace with these little stars. People will start looking at you a little bit differently if you're going to start putting fake data in order to be matched. That's not the intent of this. The intent of this is for the industry, the supply chain, to actually know what specifications manufacturers are asking for, so that they have better visibility into what they want to grow, how much they want to grow. And so as we talk through this, each farmer is going to be a little bit different in the case of what they're actually tracking yield-wise, but you get a sense. We'll give you pictures along the way of how it progressed. You'll know exactly how much the bales weigh, how many bales there is in that acreage that was produced. So all this, again, would hopefully give the processor that might be buying this yield, these bales, give them a high confidence that this stuff was treated properly, not treated like pesticide treated, but treated, grown and harvested in the spirit of quality. And so if I'm, in this case, I can go over to these products, and this is where I can add my own stuff. If I logged in as that company, I can now, as a processor, add new products into here. You can put as much information, as little information as you want. Obviously, the price and the quantity would be useful if you're trying to sell it. But all this other stuff would be important to set yourself out apart from others. And this is not like, we're never going to be really competitive in this space because there's too much demand right now for any of us to be worrying about our piece of this pie. In my mind, we need to come together. If I can't find a certain type of, like, say I have a manufacturer I'm working with and I can't find I'm not producing my own, or I can't find my own, I can buy it from another processor, a partner processor, another processor through this marketplace. That's good for them as well as good for our manufacturer, because now they're not questioning whether we can supply enough. And that's one of the big questions we get from manufacturers. Well, do you have enough supply to supply us? And you always want to say yes, but that's not the right answer, because we don't. We grew, I think in 1942, 333,000 acres of industrial hemp during World War II, and we're less than probably 60,000 acres. I know there's all kinds of people saying they're growing lots of acres. When we go out and visit, I can't necessarily validate more than 50 to 60,000 acres at best being grown across the U.S., but I may be wrong. And that's okay. So if I was a processor, you basically can add your company information, your capacity. This is important, right? Because we're going to ultimately track, if you're saying 2 tons a day, and this is ours right now, 2 shifts, we can start figuring out what capacity, say, this one processor has, or the processors in a certain region. So while this is not required to enter into this, again, this is part of how do we grow together. If we can see that there's a whole bunch of extra processing in the Midwest or in the South, this would be great information for another processor who is looking to put one there to know, so that they don't invest in something that's already a saturated market. So having this kind of information is important, again, for the stability of this supply chain. But being able to put in exactly how much you're producing for the industries, what industries you're basically supporting, all that information feeds our artificial intelligence model as well. So as time goes on, that model gets smarter and smarter about what's going on in the supply chain, and we'll start making some predictive suggestions. If you had orders, you'd have all your orders in there, et cetera, et cetera. So my products, you can add as many of these as you want. Again, everything you're seeing right now is free. You can add these products. You can engage with the commerce element of this. You have to register for that, but once you're registered, then you can have your products available to the marketplace for people to buy. As far as, it's pretty much all about the data around each one of these and how we can give others the ability to sort of validate without samples. Obviously, you're going to ask for samples, but you'll know exactly when this was harvested, pre or post flower. You'll know how long it was redded. And once again, these are things that usually you would have to have multiple conversations over, getting pictures and videos and all this other stuff sent to you through email to start realizing whether you wanted to buy that yield from that farmer. All right. Steve, anything from your side on this? Because I know you've put a ton of time in, and I know a lot of folks say that the farmers obviously are very busy, so they're not going to have the time to necessarily put this data in. And I think that's why in many cases we'll help them do that. But just if you have any thoughts on how this, how you interface with this process.
Well, Duane, I think you did a pretty good job setting it up. As you can see, it is pretty comprehensive, which means it does take some time. And I would say it is very farmer friendly, which translates to processor friendly too. It's friendly to do. That is a challenge, though, that I think there are some farmers who just would be very challenged just to get it done. As you can see, all of these varieties, and for me, I planted 9 different varieties, which is probably a lot more than most farmers would plant, but because we're doing so much research, that's the intent. Some of these varieties were only an acre or 2, but it does take some time. So I think that is necessary to be stated up front, but then the benefits are that your product is out there, because at the end of the day, we have to sell it, cash in, get the money, and make this into a cash crop. So I think we fully recognize this is an extra step. Farmers growing corn and soybeans and wheat don't have to do this, but hopefully there'll be some value added incentives here that will make it worthwhile to add all this data in order to get a market for their crop.
Yeah, because we expect that there's going to be farmers who are already growing industrial hemp that could utilize this, but it's also folks that might want to grow, might want to put 10 acres or 15 acres out on the marketplace and say, I'm willing to grow this. I'm willing to grow X, Y, and Z amount of acres, put it out there, and let a processor like us come along and sort of engage with you. So there's like 2 personas that you could look at. The folks that are already growing it, that probably already have relationships with the processor, right? So you're not trying to sell it because you've already sold it to the processor. So the question is, why would you put it in here? Again, for me, it's put it in so that we all have visibility into it. But I also understand that's not always a good reason for people to do stuff, to share it. But this is a community thing. I put the money into building this as a community tool. I'm hoping that we all can come together to add the right amount of data in here so that we can all grow together. And so all this stuff is pretty basic stuff. Once you find it, you buy it. And right now you basically can view your cart. So we don't charge any of the folks that are putting products in there. We don't charge them any fees for this. There is a processing fee for people that are buying, but that's just to cover some of our costs. And one of the things we've had a ton of problems with is identifying a good shipping infrastructure. We've worked with a whole bunch, and I mean a whole bunch, relatively speaking, way more than I wanted to. And none of them, in my mind, so far have been reliable. So we've connected to 2 or 3 of them that we'll have here that once you actually get ready to ship out, it will give you the option to get a quote for shipping. You enter your to's and froms, your lift gates, your not lift gates, your pallet, your not pallet, your sizes, all that kind of stuff. And it will do the shipping for you. And then you will track it from here as well. So the goal here is once you're in there, we want you to be able to engage with the supply chain without having to go out to a shipper and do something there. You can always do that. That's not precluding. The marketplace doesn't preclude you to just check out, buy it, and figure out shipping later. And so really, that's the commerce piece of it. And it only takes the people who are selling to engage in. We use Stripe. So you register your account information in Stripe. It has nothing. You're not putting any of that inside this marketplace. It's all external Stripe where you enter your account information so that you can actually ultimately get the results of the purchase. And again, we're not validating any of these purchases. We're not saying the quality is what the quality is. We are looking to and working with possible other partners in the education side, academia, to come up with a standard for quality measurements in a way that we could certify certain processors or certain even farms, both for carbon collection as well as certifying them for processing quality. This is downstream, but the more we can produce a stable, consistent product for the market, I think the better we'll all be in growing this market together.
We did have one question.
Sure.
So Jody McVeigh is asking, what is the cover crop tag about? I guess they research hemp and cover crops.
Yep, Steve, that's all you, buddy.
So, just making sure we're on the same page here. A cover crop is a crop or a plant planted outside of the cycle of the normal cash crop, in this case, hemp. So a cover crop would be planted probably several months, if not the fall before the hemp would be planted. So the reason that question is in there is because it is impacting a method of growing. It falls into the regenerative agriculture method of growing, which I see that to becoming more and more popular in the future, potentially at some point surpassing organic. And so just having that listed of if there was a cover crop grown or not is important. The other thing that a lot of people don't think about is if you no-till or not till the soil and have a cover crop there at the, it's the biomass is essentially starting to decay at the time of harvest of the hemp. So you plant the hemp, the cover crop is still there. In my case, I roll it down with a roller crimper. That cover crop is not swept up into the windrows when you bale the hemp. And we're working on the technology to solve that problem. We think we are on a good path to solving that problem. But if the cover crop, the dead cover crop is in the hemp, the bale of the hemp, that's debris, that's trash, that's extra stuff. You don't want that. So that's a couple reasons why we just list the use of cover crops here on this at this part of the questions.
Yeah, and we also are going to be doing research again. We are like a production research group. We're doing everything towards a business objective and strategy, but along the way, we know that this industry needs the research base. And so a lot of this stuff, we're going to start looking at the quality of the fiber coming out of regenerative farm versus a non-regenerative farm, just to see if the quality, the consistency, all those things of the fiber, the actual plant itself, was there any positive or negative effect from that also regenerative process. So again, these are all pieces of data. We're very data driven in everything we do because we know that data will ultimately set us all free, right? That will, when someone asks about quality of this industry or the demand or the supply of this industry, you can log in and show people, here's the supply, here's what's going on, and here's the level of detail that we're tracking for the quality spectrum of what we're doing in the industrial hemp space in the U.S. It's powerful. At least it has been with some of the manufacturers we've talked to. All right. And we're almost through it, but obviously as we start gleaning and getting more and more data into this marketplace, our goal here is to start showing more and more about what genetics are being grown, where they're being grown, what region they're being grown, and then how many tons are being derived out of those acres, whether you're tracking a 2 ton per acre, a 3 ton or 4 ton per acre. Once you add that data in here, we'll start understanding the tonnage of the crop itself. This is not the tonnage of hemp or herd. The fiber or the herd. This is tonnage of the crop, the yield. And this will just give you sort of a landscape of the genetic spectrum that the farmers are growing towards. And then you'll see what things are available. Like right now, there's quite a bit of the yield that's out there now that if somebody wanted to buy a bunch of Steve's yields from all his grows, he doesn't like giving them up, but he might if you're willing to pay him. He would basically be selling his yields to a processor. In this case, most likely it's going to be us, but if someone comes in today and says, Steve, I want all your yield, I'm sure Steve would be like, yeah, sure. And then, of course, right now, this is all the stuff we're doing is mainly in Pennsylvania and New Jersey. So we're sort of stuck here, but we would hope that as you folks get more engaged in this, this will open up a spectrum of how many acres we're growing, of what genetic per region. We'll start seeing that a certain genetic is being grown a lot more in a certain region, most likely because it's doing really well. Like we had a really good grow for some of the French varieties we had this year, but if you're in Texas, you're not going to probably have that. You're going to have a different one. So what we'll be able to do is start going through all that data to really start understanding and being able to tell the supply chain, hey, this is a better genetic to grow in Texas. Again, Mother Nature is Mother Nature, so you can't predict anything, but we'll start to see those patterns emerge over time. Capacity is really the processors. So how many processors do we have? What is their capacity at 1 shift, 2 shift, 3 shift? Sound like a Dr. Seuss novel there. But, when it's all said and done, it would be nice to know that like right now, the Midwest has the most, and we know that, right? But if all of a sudden the manufacturers on the East Coast, and I'm not saying they are, but let's just say they are, we're going to be like, well, why don't we have any processing on the East Coast? And yes, we do have a couple on the East Coast, but this will help both businesses have a better trajectory of where their investments will be, but it'll also tell us exactly what kind of disaster recovery model we could ultimately support. If one of these processors went down because of a tornado or something, where could we redirect that supply to another processor that had X amount of capacity above what they did for their contracts? So again, this is all about data. Once we can get it in here and we can start putting it through it's sort of data munging, we'll be able to start producing a bunch of information that we're going to give to the industry. We're not selling that stuff because this is important. And so what you'll see is the total capacity, how much of that capacity is currently under contract versus available. And for a manufacturer, again, if I'm coming in and I'm like, oh, okay, there's only a little bit of this stuff. This goes to the fact that we don't have enough supply, right? I mean, this is a microcosm of what the U.S. is because it's a very small sample. But if that was the case across the U.S., we would 100% say we need to grow more. But that's not the real case because once you start putting the processors, all the processors, and again, whether you're processing today or going to be processing next year, you're building a facility. We have a lot of folks that we talk to that say, I'm investing in it next year. That's cool. We want that data in here as well because we want to know that there's 5 processors coming online in the mid-Atlantic or the South or wherever, so that we can at least start educating people on exactly what's going on This requires us to share some information when a lot of us don't want to share because we think it's our competitive advantage. But like I said before, in my mind, there's no competition really in this industry relative to the nascency of it today. Obviously, the manufacturer, where they're supporting, where are they putting all of their fiber or herd? Bedding should be a big piece of this in the U.S., I would imagine. But as we expand our industry base, this thing should get prettier and prettier, and that's my hope. So that's the capacity of the processors, the decorticators, if you will. And obviously, we haven't done any real tracking of powder and grain, but it's in here if you want it. If you are producing grain or powder, we'd love to have you. Then, of course, the demand side, this is the manufacturing specs. So when the manufacturer puts their specifications in here, you'll see that there's a fairly large one in the Midwest that basically requires a crap ton of really high grade fiber every year. And when we talk to them, and many of you probably have talked to the same manufacturer, they basically said, well, we can't get that quality here in the US, so we buy it from overseas. To me, that's like target rich, right? If we can support that quality of fiber, which means we need to know it at the beginning, so we do the genetics, all the other stuff we talked about, then we can provide that manufacturer in the US with US-based fiber. And now we've done something. I think that's what we're trying to do, right? So you'll be able to see right now, this is saying undersupplied, and that's probably not necessarily, like I said, not true in the real world if this is scaled. But for right now, the 3 or 4 manufacturers, and you guys all know this, if you're in this industry, it's not going to take but 1 or 2 of the big ones to come in for us to need that 333,000 acres that we had back in 1942, or the 1 million acres. We're talking to at least 5 separate manufacturers that by themselves would absorb a significant amount, if not all of the supply today in the US, if they truly engage with the product in the way that they're thinking that they're gonna engage. And then weather patterns and all this other stuff, these will all be coming soon. And the last thing we have is this little chat bot. So you can ask it anything you want, how to build hempcrete and give me a plan. If I could spell something like that. And again, you could, I mean, a lot of this stuff is only going to get better as we add more and more data to it. But a lot of this has been taken off of YouTube transcripts and other types of things that we can verify and validate the data is good. Steve's book's in here, so all his knowledge about regenerative farming is now part of this knowledge base. So if you ask it a question about regenerative farming, Steve's going to get a little shout out when you ask him. But and if you said the same thing, but you're like, I want actually a video of this with a video link. And I can also say, as a farmer, tell me what the best genetic is, or as a manufacturer, or as a processor, and it gives you different context when you ask those questions. So you see the video that it put. So, you know, obviously, just copy and paste that out. But this is only early phases. So everything you're seeing today is a very small microcosm of what this could be. At a minimum, we're using this as a tool for us. So don't feel obligated, but we're also willing to continue to develop this so that we can, as a community, start collecting the data that we need to make better decisions, solidify the quality aspect of what we're doing, decrease the time it takes to find, to buy, to ship, and start serving those manufacturers that are buying that $100 million or more worth of fiber from overseas. So that is kind of everything. Again, once you log in, you'll be able to play around with it yourself and do all the searches and all that. But the goal here is, if I know exactly what specifications I want, and I can say, give me everything that's 5% less moisture, that's herd. And I know that's a very basic, but here you go. Like, these are the 4 that come up to those specs. If you added a couple more specs, it might only be 2 of them. Eventually, it only might be 1. And what you also see is that there's some of these folks that are putting their future products in here too. There's a couple that are producing higher grade quality fiber, and they're going to be releasing in the fall. So they'll put it in here at the specifications that they're targeting, and just make sure it's known that it's actually a fall 2023 product. So this isn't really just about, you know, what we've got going, but also what's coming. These things over here are simply saying that you can't buy this product right now from this this processor, because they haven't engaged into that commerce. And then, of course, this one you could, if you wanted to buy the 100, you just simply just do that and back in business. All right, that's I think, unless I missed something, Steve, or anybody else out there, I'd love to hear what everyone's thoughts are.
Can I just give a little shout out to the chatbot tractor that's harvesting the data? Like, I think that is super cute. And
Yeah.
and Steve, you need to put Grizzly in here somewhere. So
There you
for those
go.
who don't know, Grizzly is Steve's dog, and he is a very good boy.
Yeah.
We can do that because my son's the one who designed that and designed the little tractor too. So yeah, we can definitely, we'll put anything in there you guys want. Just put suggestions in.
Yeah, this is fantastic. Like, building reliable supply chains is the most important thing that this industry needs and has to do. And the sharing of data, to your point, is something that has been severely lacking in the industry. So this kind of collaborative effort in building this, I think, is fantastic. So with that, if anybody has any questions, you can raise your hand if you would like to speak, and I will unmute you, or you could type a question in the chat box. We have some comments in here. Jody said that they tested several varieties in Central Texas, and I hope this can get things connected for industrial hemp. Thank you for doing this. And Timothy Prophet says it's amazing and he loves your website.
Sweet. Yeah, I just, like I said, man, this is, I didn't know anything about this 8-9 months ago. I'm a believer. I put a lot of money into making this marketplace work. I want to hear opinions. I want to hear anybody who has thoughts on how to make it better. I'll continue to put the money into building it and supporting it. I just want it to become something that we actually use. I know it's a pain in the butt doing our regular business hours to enter more data somewhere else. We obviously, as time goes and more sensors, we're working on carbon credit, blockchain tracing. So if you imagine from the seed all the way through, we'll have some visibility into that over time. And so there's a lot of opportunities working together to make this thing actually even better.
Okay. Edward Rico, go ahead.
All right, so I think this is amazing. First off,
Thank you.
The idea is great. I'm not gonna lie, I've had similar concepts of creating a centralized version of decentralized supply chain for the hemp industry, because I think that's where it needs to be. I agree with all of you that we do need to have some kind of regulations and standards and a way to track all the certification and everything. That's been an idea in my head and a couple of people's heads over here for a while. I do have a question though. Where do you guys see yourself growing as a meta company? You guys are becoming, or trying to become, the Alibaba of hemp, which respect. I totally think we need that. This is totally needed. But to that end, are you guys planning to add more finished products, not just farm and processing focus? I'm talking like maybe the plastics, or maybe actually the protein powders that end up coming as a result from the original seeds that you guys sell as well. Like where's the end in your supply chain that you guys see?
Yeah, I think you have, first of all, a great question. Thank you for your comment. It's funny you say Alibaba, because we were talking to investors very early on, and they said, we're not going to invest because we can do this in Alibaba, right? So I said to them, go ahead and find yourself these specifications of herd in Alibaba. And they searched, and they got decortication machines, they got apparel, they got all kinds of stuff. And I said, go to one place that's only industrial hemp. It's going to be easier
Yes.
to find it and be
Yes.
more fine-tuned. Now, to your other question, I've just got, like in this closet over here, from the Himalayan hemp. You'll see it on LinkedIn. If you're following me, you'll see all this stuff I just bought from a manufacturer of clothing, of all kinds of stuff. So to answer your question, I believe that eventually we will get to the point where there'll be a offshoot or a side-by-side aspect of this, because it only makes sense as part of the supply chain to also prove how this product became a usable product, and then allow that to be sort of looked at in the holistic view of success. So yes, we've asked the same Himalayan, the folks in Nepal that are doing this asked us to put all their products in our marketplace to sell. And I was just not ready to do that yet, because we want to get this stuff out the door. But your point is extremely pertinent.
That's perfect. I actually have a second question to this. Is this marketplace live right now? Like, are these the current minimums? Like 100 pounds is a minimum order. Is that what I'm understanding?
No. This just means that that's all I ordered.
Oh, that's you ordered.
Right
Okay.
here. Yep. I can buy one.
Okay.
1 pound.
Okay.
But this is your total available. So you're only gonna, if I try to do 300, it's not gonna let me do it, right?
Got you.
Yeah, it'll put it to 250.
Perfect. Yeah, these if one is your minimum, then that's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, it might not make sense for someone to ship, 1 pound, but hey,
If they're
it's
willing to
worth
pay
a shot.
shipping, yeah. I mean,
Yep.
that's cool. That's cool. This is great. I love the whole concept and idea. Yeah, I'd love to talk to you guys even further, because I was actually working to raise money beforehand in my previous experience, to raise money for the industrial hemp industry, to create a more cohesive hemp industry. And then that was a whole different experience. And so, but
I hear you.
This is a great way to centralize a lot of information. And I do like that you guys were very, very focused on the details that you guys put in. It seems like you guys did put in a lot of work.
I appreciate that. There's a lot of work with other people to say, like, for instance, I would have never known to put till or no till in anything, unless it was a gin till or something. I don't know. But yeah, it requires a community to make this thing work. And I think that if you haven't heard anything from me today, that's what this is about. It's a tool, but we're all in this together if we're here. So let's make it work.
Excellent. I actually have a question. As more formalized standards come into play, like ASTM standards and things of that nature, are you going to have some fields where you could search for those particular standards?
Yeah, you'll see. We'll have like little badges for certification, so that you'll be able to basically put in your search, I only want things with this, like maybe it's the National Hemp Association certification of quality or something, right? Whatever that is, whatever quality standard it is, as long as it's third party, it's not us, but it's a third party that's giving us that guideline and that standard. We would love that to be part of this process, to give that stamp of approval. And I think that comes with consistency too, because you can send one bag of this stuff to get tested and it comes back really well and you get your stamp, but then the next 2 bags are really crappy. So we've got to figure out a way to make sure we maintain whatever that is in a sort of time sense, not time, but linear kind of fashion. So I think it's a big gap that if we can come together and figure out, and you guys are right on the front of standards, right? So I would hope maybe you guys can help us, find the right path forward.
Fun. Kristen Steen says from New York and starting up again after 7 years of trying, and is setting up for processing for hurd and fiber, and says this is excellent. Thank you. Nice.
Well, we'd love to know more about it, just because we want to make sure we get you out there to we are talking to, one of the things that we do pretty well is we engage with the manufacturing base. My partner is very well connected to a lot of the end consumers, restaurants, A lot of folks that will use the downstream products of a biodegradable plastic or a bio or degradable ceiling tile, whatever that is. And so we know that eventually those manufacturers are going to turn on a spigot, and we're not going to be ready to supply all of that. And we never would expect to do that. So we want to make sure we have those local regional decorticators, people that are doing this, so that we can leverage all of that into the supply chain stability side of things. So that's awesome.
Excellent. And while we're thinking of it, how about telling our listeners how to get in touch with you if they would like to engage in further conversation?
Sure. Email is pretty straightforward. D Shugars. So yeah, DSHUGARS at I-HEMP KATALYST with the K. Drives my wife crazy. She says, "You misspelled it." And I said, "No, I didn't." But it drives her nuts. But anyway, IHempKatalyst.com. I'll give you my phone number. I don't care. It's not like this is out to the world. Well, it will be, but well, maybe I won't. I just thought about once it gets out to like a bigger social media base, maybe it's not great. I'll be getting all kind of prank calls. But yeah, just email me. And Steve, why don't you give your email address?
Yeah, easiest is Steve at stevegroff.com. Steve at stevegroff.com.
It's about as easy an email address to remember as possible.
Yep.
I need a better one too. Maybe I'll just put D at Hemp Catalyst. No, anyway, we got 3 registrations as we were talking, so that's good.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Anyone else have any questions or comments? Can you repeat the email? I believe it's dshugars at I-HempKatalyst.com.
Or maybe you want to put, now there we go. Or maybe you want to put it in the chat.
Yeah, I will. But this
And
will
we
be,
will, we'll
yeah, there you
definitely
go.
make sure that we include this in the email that we'll send out to all of you, that will have a link to the video and the blog post that we're going to have surrounding this. So we will make sure that you have an easy way to get all the relevant contact information.
As you always do.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right.
Anybody else? Last call.
Closing time.
If I'm still, oh yeah, I'm still going. I
Yeah.
actually do have another question. So I just started a consulting business for businesses to make them more sustainable. Mostly hemp focused, because I love hemp in every which way, shape, and form. So I'm trying to get a bunch of hemp products to offer all kinds of businesses as an alternative for whatever packaging or processing or wherever they're in. I've met a lot of people through the supply chains. So I'm wondering, is there going to be like a way to gain affiliate like credit? Can if I'm able to sell something from someone else, am I going to benefit from that? Or how can I benefit? Or are you guys trying to implement that like an affiliate program for selling other people's products here?
Yeah, I mean, that is all within the infrastructure. It's not a conversation we've had, but we can put flags and tags on to any of the purchases in the products, so that a piece of it goes to an affiliate. So yeah, we just have to talk through that, but the infrastructure is built to do that.
It's perfect.
Yeah, we need people promoting the products after they're built, because that will then create the downstream demand, right? Right.
Anyone else? Okay, well, if there are no other questions, thank you, Duane. Thank you, Steve. NHA certainly values having you as business members, and we're happy to be able to provide this platform to promote your service. This is going to be a big deal for the industry, and look forward to watching it grow, and look forward to getting this industry where we all know it can eventually be. And these are all the steps that are necessary to get there. So Thank you for joining us. Thank you, all of you, for tuning in. We look forward to hosting more of these types of webinars. Again, we will be sending this recording out to everybody who registered. And we will also be making it publicly available on our website and on our YouTube channel, probably a little bit early next week. But with that, thank you again, everybody, and look forward to seeing you next time.
All right, thanks.